I now give the floor to Mr. Mankeur Ndiaye. The floor is yours.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, in the wake of the report by the Secretary General on the situation in the Central African Republic and in line with Resolution 2448, it is my pleasure to present to you with the recent developments on the ground, as well as with the state of implementation of the mandate of the multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in the Central African Republic. Mr. President, can never be said enough. Signing of the political agreement for peace and reconciliation in the Central African Republic on the 6th of February gave rise to a lot of hope within the country and in the region, as well as within the international community. And this hope includes that there will be a definitive end to the long and violent crisis in the CAR that's been raging for decades. Since the signing of the agreement, the government and the partners of CAR have redoubled their efforts in order to implement the agreement. A new government, a more inclusive one, came into being on the 22nd of March at the end of the consultations in Addis Ababa. The international community, under the aegis of the United Nations, African Union, European Union, met in Bangui on the 17th of April last within the framework of the International Support Group in order to remobilize regional and international actors. On the 31st of May, a joint high-level mission by the government of CAR, the ECAS, and MINUSCA was deployed on the ground in order to demand from the heads of 3R their cooperation in order to arrest those who are responsible for the 21 May last. And the mission went to Kui on the 18th of June, and the heads of the group committed themselves to start the DDR on the 29th June in order to put together the first mixed specialized security group units in the west of the country, and they also committed themselves to cooperate with judicial inquiries on the massacres. And I would like to inform the Council that after that, and in addition to our good officers, the mission has started a military operation, bringing additional pressure to bear in order to strengthen the protection of civilians, prevent new attacks against civilians or reprisals, and in order to stop all of the armed group movements in the area. And these joint efforts accomplished within the framework of the mandate and in line with the peace agreement resulted in the arrest of 3 people within the 3R who are suspected of being involved in the 21st May events. The situation remains fragile, as can be shown by all of this. Every week, there are about 50 to 70 violations of the agreement, mainly by the armed groups. And violence against civilians, illegal levying of taxes, the obstruction to the deployment of state authority, occupying public buildings continue in a source of deep frustration for the people of Central African Republic. Mr. President, in this context, MINUSCA continues implementing the multidimensional mandate that the Council entrusted it with, all the while using its good offices in order to urge parties to scrupulously adhere to the commitments they undertook under the peace agreement and accompanying them. And despite the challenges, we continue working with the government, the guarantors, and other facilitators and partners in order to provide with every political and logistical support needed to ensure the success of the agreement. We support the structures provided for under the agreement, be it various follow-up mechanisms locally and nationally, or special joint security units, or inclusive commissions of justice having to do with conflict, or the future Commission on Truth, Justice, Reparation, and Reconciliation. its consultations were started on the 6th June by President Touadéra. We also mobilize ourselves in order to conduct a sensibilization campaign in order to inform the local actors on the agreement and obtain their cooperation in its implementation. MINUSCA also continues supporting local peace and reconciliation committees in all of the prefectures of the country. But the success of the agreement, Mr. President, will depend first and foremost on the will of the parties to put an end to any kind of violence and to go for dialogue in order to settle any form of dispute as stipulated in the agreement. In order to preserve trust in the agreement, the armed groups have to abide by the security arrangements to which they signed up on the 6th of February. In this regard, the announcement yesterday to dismantle all illegal barriers is an encouraging sign, which I hope will be followed by specific actions. This was made by the Popular Front for the Renaissance, which is the main armed group. The complete implementation of the security provisions in the agreement should contribute to the reduction of violence having to do with transhumans and will represent a crucial state in restoring security and extending the authority of state. Lasting improvements when it comes to security and stabilization will also require a rapid progress in the area of disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and repatriation, DDRR. And I'm happy to say that the DDR operations in May and June resulted in demobilization of 90 combatants from the Revolution and Justice SAYO movement, which already started disarming in December 2018. MINUSCA works with the government, the guarantors, and other partners in order to launch DDR in other armed groups in future, and this will provide for the creation and rapid deployment of mixed security units. We also continue with the support to security sector reform. I welcome the efforts made by the government to make sure the forces are more representative of the population, that they're more professional and that they're more effective. Given this triple goal, and the government recently finalized a national recruitment campaign for the Central African Armed Forces, FACA, and the recruitment campaign for police and gendarmerie will take place in the near future. The Central Africans pin a great deal of hopes on peace. They want to continue working in safety, have access to drinking water, healthcare, education, jobs, and justice. We therefore have to create conditions and an environment which is conducive towards economic recovery, providing job opportunities for the young people so as to make sure that they don't become members of the armed group. And that is why the mission and the United Nations cooperate very closely to ensure that security efforts, development efforts, and peace-building efforts are coordinated and create the necessary synergy for lasting peace. Mr. President, the humanitarian situation is disastrous, and it continues impeding prospects for peace because people are not in a position to meet their most basic needs. 2.9 million people, half of them children, need humanitarian assistance and protection. 2.1 million of people have to live under conditions of food insecurity. It is essential for the peace agreement to contribute towards creating better access to humanitarian assistance, and that development activities be launched in those areas which are already stable. Also, adequate support needed to be extended to 622,000 people displaced, 590,000 Central African refugees in neighboring countries. Our humanitarian response plan for 2019 requires $430 million. It's only been financed at the level of 28%, and this is very largely insufficient. So I am calling for the generosity of donors to come to the help of these very numerous vulnerable people. Mr. President.
This agreement will also depend on its ability to address the many human rights violations which have characterized the crisis and whose victims claim for redress. In this regard, I am glad to stress that the National Consultation for the Creation of the Truth, Justice, Reparation and Reconciliation Commission will allow Central Africans to contribute their views on how best to ensure redress for victims of abuse, the application of justice for those involved in grave crimes, and the path towards national reconciliation. Progress towards national reconciliation and the integration of armed groups into state force and the society will be critical for allowing election to take place in 2020-2021 as planned. À ce propos, la Cour constitutionnelle a déclaré non conformes à la Constitution certains articles du Code électoral récemment adoptés par l'Assemblée nationale. Cette Assemblée sera
The Assembly will call upon to work, to sit in order to review the text approved by the court. Otherwise, without this, there will be an institutional blockage. Any delay in adoption of the electoral code could lead to a delay in elections, but these elections are a crucial step in strengthening democracy in Central African Republic. Everything, therefore, has to be implemented to make sure that the elections, whose preparatory work will require financial, technical, and operational support internationally on a large scale, have to be done in order to make sure that the elections do take place within the framework stipulated by the Constitution. Similarly, for the elections to continue under peaceful conditions, all of the actors need to, as of today, display restraint and wisdom. I note a political platform composed of 20 political parties and 4 civil society organizations which are very strongly opposed to the peace agreement. And I would like this opposition to the agreement not to be an impediment to the peace process and the development of countries. MINUSCA will always be able to count on the support of Security Council and the entire international community to make sure that we can discharge our mandate. Thank you.